Welcome to the College Football Survivor Show, where playoff survival is always on the line. Here's Shehan Jeyarajah and Bobak Hayeri.
All right. Hi, everybody. This is the College Football Survivor Show, where we're all about the race for the College Football Playoff Championship. I'm Bobak Hayeri, and I'm joined, as always, by Shehan Jeyarajah, national college football writer for CBS Sports. You can find us on X and TikTok at CFB Survivor Show, where you can participate in polls, see video highlights of the show, and send us feedback. Of course, we're a podcast, and we always appreciate it when you take a moment to like, rate, and subscribe to our show wherever you find us. Good reviews are always welcome. This is a show dedicated to finding the ultimate survivor in the college football playoff race. So we're all about the pair of games that are coming up on January 1st in the semifinals. We've spent the previous shows talking about bigger picture items and key players to watch. Today, we're going to begin a new series, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Shehan, to tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, so this is the last year of the 4-team playoff, of course, and we got 4 contenders. We got 4 finalists for this last group. We can argue about the fact that one of them, maybe shouldn't be here. That's a conversation for 2 podcasts ago, but we're here, and we're going to start our talk with the Rose Bowl, and we're going to start with Alabama today. We're going to go through every one of the 4 teams, get experts and analysts from each of the 4 teams who have been around the teams all year long, and I'm excited, Bobak. How about you?
I am too. I cannot wait to get this started. So today we're going to start with Matt Stahl. Matt covers the Alabama Crimson Tide for AL.com. He's previously covered the Mizzou Tigers for the Columbia Daily Tribune, and started his career covering the Sport of Kings, the horsey set for Horse Racing Nation. So he actually knows how to read a racing form. But we're here to talk about the Tide. Matt, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Thank y'all for having me. I listen to the show pretty frequently. I appreciate it. Y'all do sort of a like college football playoff podcast. It isn't just like corporate nonsense. So glad to be here.
Well, let's get started with a little bit of nonsense, okay? So most important question I'm going to ask today. I need you to power rank these 4 quarterbacks, okay? Jalen Milroe, Austin Reed, Caden Veltkamp, and Brady Cook. 1 through 4 in order.
Oh, boy. All right,
Matt, by the way, is a Western Kentucky grad for people who don't know.
Yeah. Caden Veltkamp, who I covered in high school, was making $35 a game, stringing for the Bowling Green Daily News at the time, and he was at Southmore in high school in Bowling Green. So I covered a few games of his. He actually succeeded Steve Spurrier's grandson as the quarterback of the South Warren Spartans. Austin Reed just wasn't there for the famous Toastery Bowl, the most important postseason game. Brady Cook, Jalen Milroe is a toss-up. I will say I felt fairly vindicated this season by, I went on the radio right before I left the Mizzou beat, and somebody was, some radio guy was like, "What are they going to get? Are they going to get Brady Cook out of there and get a dude?" I'm like, I think Brady Cook could actually be all right as long as he can stand up during the game, and I was right. So yeah, him and Milroe. I'm not gonna get the Tide fans or the Tigers fans running at me. So we'll put them tied for third between the two, behind the 2 Western Kentucky guys.
Nice. I love it. So, I have to ask you, this has obviously been a really interesting year to be covering the Tide, to watch their development, watch how the season has shifted, particularly from what we saw in the first several weeks to where we are now. As someone who's just been obviously watching this team as close as anyone can outside of just not being within the offices themselves, what was the change? How would you characterize those changes after the loss to Texas and that close that close win over South Florida? What were the transitions you saw that turned them into the team? Because I think all of us started to get that vibe. Like, here comes Alabama. Oh wow, where did they? Suddenly they became inevitable again. But from what you observed, what was that tonal shift?
Tonal shift, boy. I think that South Florida game just woke a lot of them up. I mean, there's the conspiracy theories out there that Saban was kind of sandbagging that game a little bit to maybe make people realize Jalen Milroe probably is the best quarterback on this team, because obviously he didn't play in that game. And I would never think like Nick Saban was actually like trying to throw the first half of a game or whatever, but it did, like, it changed the, I guess, makeup of my inbox. Alabama fans, kind of a rowdy bunch. I was getting a lot of like, oh, we got to get Milroe out of here. Milroe should never play another snap at the University of Alabama. Then after, one half each of watching Tyler Buckner and Ty Simpson play football, it was this Milroe kid. He's the future of the program. You get Milroe back out there. But for him, I think the big difference, and maybe this is it for the whole team, although you've seen different groups kind of get it in different weeks, it's just sort of been a confidence thing. Like, you watch him those first few weeks against Texas, and even against Middle Tennessee State, he just looks so tentative. And it come the Ole Miss game where Saban had come out on Monday, which he doesn't usually do in QB competition seasons, and say, like, yes, Milroe's the guy. We're sticking with him. The competition's done. We're going with Jalen. Like, it seemed like he was less just afraid to make a mistake, and sort of as a result stopped making a lot of mistakes. Like, it just and you watch where the mistakes wouldn't rattle him as much. Like, he threw the first pick against Texas, and he just shook. He was done at that point. They're losing the game because he was never getting his head back in it. The team was never getting their head back in it. And I mean, you see him a few other times this season. He'll go throw one interception and just come back out and shake it off. And, he's running his signature pass play, which is, Jermaine Burton, run real fast. I'll throw it real far. Touchdown. Seemingly, unrattled is the word that comes to mind, but that's not a word, but like unaffected, I guess, by previous mistakes. And that's been sort of the tale of the whole team. Everybody's looking just more confident, I think, week to week.
One of the things was in that South Florida game, we obviously saw them struggle on the offensive line so much. They allowed, 5 sacks, I think it was, against South Florida. And obviously, Cade Proctor, the true freshman starting at left tackle, got a lot of attention for his struggles that game. How much do you think this unit has grown, especially when you look at that Georgia game and as you look forward to a Michigan game?
Yeah, they've got significantly better through the season. I mean, like, the group just looks so shaken. Even in the Middle Tennessee State game, like, Milroe was spending a lot of time running for his life against a defensive front that, like, should not have had anybody running for their life at any point in the season. And then, that South Florida game was awful. Caden Proctor was abysmal, frankly, for the first half of the season. And I mean, they've had other issues too. Like, you've seen, I mean, even JC Latham was missing blocks just uncharacteristically. Seth McLaughlin, the snapping was so bad. I mean, he switched to doing more of a dead ball snap midway through the season just because, like, it was rolling to Milroe. It was going over Milroe's head. And it kind of reared up again in the Iron Bowl, right? Like, you saw that 4th and 31 was 31 yards because the snap went when Milroe wasn't ready for it, and he had to just dive on the ball. But yeah, it's like the unit's just gelled a little bit. Proctor is just looking better and better. I think maybe some of it, I guess it could have been sort of a conditioning issue because he's looked better towards the end of games now. Like, it's not like he's made a few blocks and then sort of faded out. But I think, being right there next to Tyler Booker, obviously very good guard, very experienced, I think has helped him out. Seems like the line is just maybe communicating a little better. Like, there were some of those blocks early in the season where it was just clear nobody knew who they were supposed to be blocking for some reason. And those plays have been fixed. Also, I mean, Milroe's looked less afraid to run, so maybe that just has something to do with it.
Going into that, how much also have you seen the influence of Tommy Rees coming into this? Because obviously it was his new year running this particular offense. And as he got comfortable in his role, did that also lend itself to Jalen Milroe's comfort in the pocket and his ability to move and confidence to move? Because certainly we saw that. There was definitely a correlation with his ability just to make decisions, move on his plays. He was back there less as well to necessarily get as many sacks as he had in the first half of the year. How much of that change have you noticed as well, or what sort of correlation do you see there?
I think Tommy's sort of simplified it a little bit for him. Like, he's given Jalen sort of, I guess, permission is the word, to, like, go use his legs when he needs to. Because you hear Nick Saban and Jalen Milroe talk about this all the time. He's trying to be the point guard for the offense. He's not the shooting guard. He's the distributor, and all that's fine until there's three linebackers bearing down on you in the backfield, and you just need to turn it up the field and go get your 15 yards or whatever because nobody's open. Yeah, but on the Tommy front, he's he's another one who my inbox is a lot less complaints than it did at the beginning of the season. I mean, you even saw him, I think it was in that South Florida game where the camera cut to him just looking miserable in the booth up there calling plays. But it's got better. I think they figured out what's going to work for this offense as part of it. They're not feeling out as much stuff now. They know the good stuff, and the good stuff is, we're gonna try and set up the run for sort of Jace McClellan, Roy Dell Williams, and Jalen as needs to be. There's not a whole lot of super high percentage pass stuff that they're doing anymore. I think Spencer Hall was making the joke that if you looked at a Milroe stat line after the game and he completed 70% of his passes, they probably lost. But they figured out all right, we got Isaiah Bond and we got Jermaine Burton. Some other guys too. Malik Benson, former track athlete who just hasn't been as involved on this team as he could be. But they got a lot of fast dudes who can run straight and run far, and Milroe who can, throw the ball as far as you need to get it past the defense. So it's to me, it seemed like they've just figured out what's worked and haven't tried to get too inventive beyond that.
When you look at this team defensively, obviously, that secondary gets a lot of attention. Those edge rushers get a lot of attention. How do you feel like this interior group has played? And, obviously they're playing a team in Michigan that wants to run at you, run all over you, et cetera, et cetera. That's what they want to do every single play. And when you look at what Georgia did 2 years ago to beat them, when you look at the issues that TCU presented last year, so much of it was getting them out of their group in the running game. How do you think Alabama kind of stacks up from that perspective?
They're pretty good. They've been a little banged up. Jaheim Otis has had some injury issues through the season. He might be the biggest player on the team. I think maybe J.C. Latham hasn't beat, but he's enormous. So they got some of the big. Tim Keenan is in there, very good. A defensive end like Justin Oboigbe's been really, really awesome for him throughout the season. Linebacker, Deontay Lawson's been injured, but they've been able to shake off some injuries at linebacker this year. In part just because Jahad Campbell coming off the bench has been so strong at the inside linebacker spot there, being able to come in and take over for Deontay or whoever's injured. But they stack up well. They sort of end up being, I guess, kind of the unsung heroes of the team. Just because, they got Dallas Turner, they got Kool-Aid McKinstry. You're gonna be the unsung hero when those dudes are on the team.
Absolutely. One of the areas that's been curious to me too, just kind of building on this, watching Alabama prepare for this game. And obviously we've been hearing a little bit, they've only just started from what I understand. There were 3 practices in?
3 practices in, yeah.
Yeah. What, at the time of this recording, for the record, where coming from what you've observed, what's the approach that Coach Saban and his group is going at this? Have they hinted at all that there are directions they see themselves heading, preparing for this Michigan offense?
No, they've talked a little bit about it being, it's more balanced than some of the ones they face. They really like to run the ball. So I guess getting back into what Saban said had been the focus through 3 practices, which was just getting back to fundamentals. And some of the players echoed that too. Dallas Turner had a quote about, we're going to need to put our hard hats on here. This team, you remember Michigan a few years ago showed off up at the playoff with the run the damn ball stuff and all of that. They were gonna mash on, was it Georgia that year? Was it Alabama that year? Whatever team it was, it did not work.
I think that was the TCU game actually that they did that and they couldn't run the ball.
Oh yeah. It didn't work.
Not every team is Penn State. Not every team is Penn State.
But they're well aware this is going to be more of a rushing attack challenge than they faced, and I don't know how it's going to. They haven't faced a whole ton of teams that just want to mash on you this season. Auburn was able to really like get a strong run push going. But that was the Iron Bowl at Auburn, so like I just throw it in the trash. Like anything that happened in that game, like to me, happened in just a weird other space where it's like how much can you really take that into account? And then I mean Georgia inexplicably stuck with the run like far too long in that SEC championship game, and I mean they were able to stop that pretty well. So this one, obviously Michigan can run the ball better than Georgia has, but it's going to be an interesting matchup, especially with some of the strengths Alabama has on defense.
It's interesting because through the first little bit of the year, I mean, you look at this Alabama resume, and we're not gonna do the Florida State thing again, I promise. But you look, and there's a 3-point win over Arkansas. There's a 6-point win over Texas A&M. Like the impressive sort of wins before the Georgia game, and the Georgia game is what it is. We're like knocking Jaden Daniels out against LSU, and we're like Ole Miss not being able to hang, which is not something that's new to this season. So, I mean, when you're looking at this Alabama team, and it is your first year on the beat, but not your first year in the SEC, I mean, how good exactly do you think this Alabama team is? Is this a team that should enter the playoffs as a title favorite? Is this one that is one of the weaker teams of the Saban years? I mean, even for me, it's been a little difficult to try to figure that out.
Yeah, no, I also have no idea. And on the Florida State thing, I'll tell you, I thought Florida State should have got in. Don't tell the Gumps, but that's just never how the committee has like processed these things before. It was weird that like I was all out like publicly, like telling us like I don't think they're getting in. This isn't how the committee operates. And boy, they proved me wrong on that one. I feel awful for Florida State, even though I'm looking forward to going to the Rose Bowl. It's worked out advantageously for me. But yeah, I don't know on how good Alabama is. I really don't. Like if you got me at the beginning of SEC play, like absolutely not. They shouldn't be a playoff contender. They get smoked by any team that's going to be in the play. I mean, they lost to Texas at home. But at this point, I mean, I've watched them look better literally every single week and just figure out ways to win games. Like you look at that Auburn game where, I mean, I got a good, if you look at my Twitter, like I got, or X or whatever they're calling it now, like I got from the opposite side of the end zone, like I got the throw to win that game. The reason I was standing there was because I was going to have to turn around and run through the tunnel because there's going to be a field rush and I had to get to the press conference. Like they've been able to just find these ways to win games that like I have no idea really what's going to happen in these playoff games. Like even if they play Texas again, Texas beat them pretty soundly, I thought, and I couldn't I wouldn't bet on that game either way.
Well, let me build on that then. Let's look at the immediate game coming up in the Rose Bowl, which, by the way, is a fabulous venue. I've never covered the bowl, but I've been there for a UCLA game or two. Actually, and I've been to a Rose Bowl, but as a fan, long ago. But what are the keys to Alabama victory over Michigan on January 1st? Let's start with just this upcoming game. Whether or not they can win the whole thing, that's a whole other question. But heading into this game, what are your keys for success for the Tide?
Shake and loose. I think they're going to need to get some of those explosive plays going, whether it's Milroe taking off and, going 60 yards for a touchdown, whether it's going over the top, hitting, one of those speedy receivers going 75 yards for a touchdown. Like they're going to need a couple of those. This Michigan defense is good. It's not going to give you a whole lot. You got to really capitalize when you're able to. Defensively, I mean, those edge rushers are going to be huge, I think. And I mean, they have Chris Braswell replaced Will Anderson, and he's done a remarkable job doing that. It means as much as anybody can replace Will Anderson. And obviously, Dallas Turner's been what he's been for years. He'll be a draft pick. They'll both probably be draft picks this year. I'm just assuming Dallas Turner's leaving early at this point. Like why would he come back? But he's going to be big. They're going to need to stop. I don't even know if they're going to need to fully shut down that run game, right? But like they're going to need to limit it enough. That'll be key. And then I'll go a special teams one. Eliminate some of these mistakes. Like one of the low key things that's hurt Alabama this season is nobody can field punts. Like Kool-Aid McKinstry was one of the best like punt returners in the league last year, and like he's barely been able to catch the ball. They put Caleb Downs in against Chattanooga, and he ran one back for a touchdown. But even he's having like real issues just fielding the thing. So you got to eliminate some of the gaffes, I think, on special teams.
If Alabama does get upset by Michigan, what's the exhaust port? What are they shooting into to make this thing explode?
Ooh, that's a good. See, it's got to the point where it's a team without a whole lot of like really obvious weakness at this point. Like, I guess it's the offensive line. Like, I guess Michigan is just getting to Milroe and not letting any sort of run game happen, and keeping him contained where he has to make throws that aren't there yet. And then this Alabama team really isn't super built to chase. So I think if Michigan can get out and, go up 14 or, go up 21 or, somewhere in there, like Alabama, I think would have a hard time coming back from that, I think is where Michigan is going to be finding success.
Yeah, to follow up on that real quick, do you feel like at this point, because you look back at the Texas loss, one of the biggest stats of that game, 2 interceptions from Jalen Milroe. Do you think against an elite level defense like Michigan has, is he a turnover risk at this point, or are we just past that point?
No, because like a lot of those intermediate throws he was really struggling with, he's either making them or they're just not in the playbook anymore. Like when you see him miss, he's missing long on a deep ball. Like he'll make an inexplicable read from time to time, but it won't be intercepted because he's not going somewhere where it's going to be intercepted. Like it's going somewhere just where it's just going to hit grass. I mean, you saw, terrible beat writer. I can't remember what exact game it was, but I think everybody saw like the worst miss of all time by Milroe, where it may have been Roydell Williams, was just open downfield, and Milroe just pulls the trigger a bit too early and just goes way past him. Like that kind of thing will happen. But he's not throwing balls into harm's way, except, I mean, you look at some of his passes, if he's throwing like a short ball towards the sideline, which is one that they've really kind of taken out, like those things still hang in the air. Like he'll take all day for that ball to get there. Against a really good defense, that's going to go back for 6. But I think Tommy Reese and company have done a good job just like putting him in a place offensively where like his mistakes are 1-play mistakes. They're not 6-point mistakes.
This is something I know you've written about recently, and it's a story that obviously we'd be remiss not to mention involving Michigan. But everyone who's listening to this is probably hardcore enough to know about the whole Connor Stallion story at Michigan and all the signs and all of that stuff. And I know Coach Saban's been asked about it a few times back when it was breaking out, but also now heading into this game. So how is he and how's Coach Saban and the staff viewing this particular issue heading into the Rose Bowl?
Well, when I asked him on Monday, yesterday, he said, "Are you changing the signs for this game?" He's like, "Oh, not really. We're not really focused on that." Which I'm not reporting anything here. Seems untrue. Like that,
but would they do it anyway? Wouldn't they be doing it anyway? That's my other thought too.
Yeah, that's a good point. And he did mention, he's like, we kind of change things up a little bit every game. I guess one of the Connor Stallions games was that 2021 SEC championship game against Georgia, was one that he had a minion at. But I mean, it's just like, if your signs haven't changed since 2021 at this point, what are you doing? Like, somebody's got them since 2021. So like, surely they're at least going to be a little bit different for this game. And I mean, also, if you want to look at, and to me, it's the college football equivalent of like the basketball team that goes and hires like a recruit's dad to be like their, director of some nonsense so they can go get a 5-star recruit. Rick Stansbury used to do this all the time at Western Kentucky. But they went and hired George Hilo, who was Michigan's linebackers coach last season. So, there's a little gamesmanship going on both ways, I think.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, too, because that's been kind of another story floating out there, especially on the Michigan side of it. It's like, oh, they got our old linebacking coach. What are they trying to do? What are the thoughts of there? What has been your impression of that particular hire?
They probably did it for the same reason everybody thinks they did it. But Saban has said, he's like, in the midst of, we got this playoff coming up, we got the early signing period happening, I'm on the road recruiting all the time. He's like, we always bring somebody in to like kind of add to the staff, somebody who's sort of works as a special assistant to me, who can kind of brief me on what's going on when I get back from the road, which to me, your staff is pretty big. Like in the first place, like surely that person already existed on staff.
No. This one other guy is going to fix everything.
Yes. If we know anything about football coaches, it's that they're truthful about their intentions at all times. That's the one thing every football coach is. So, I of course believe Nick Saban with my whole heart when he says, when he minimizes the fact that it was his college football playoff opponents, like last linebackers coach.
The real question is going to be, I wonder who they hire next. Do they hire a Fresno State assistant? Do they hire, I guess they've already got Alabama guys, who might have been tied to Steve Sarkisian already. So maybe they don't need to hire somebody new in that case. I'm just curious who they think that they're going to get next. So let's kind of close things out with this. So we've mentioned the Michigan matchup. Who do you think is the better matchup for Alabama heading into a national championship game? Would it be Washington or would it be Texas?
That's a great question, and it's a great question because I haven't got to watch that much Washington football this season.
You should. They're a lot of fun.
I think they, from what I've seen, it's one of those, like, if you're the beat writer, you don't actually get to watch as much football. Like when I was in horse racing, first of all, I was, you know this as well as anybody, trying to get out of horse racing. No offense to my old bosses, but I really wanted to be in college football. And so I'd just sit there on Saturdays, like do my horse racing work for my apartment, 5-screen college football all day. And since I've been a beat writer, it's like I get to watch the Alabama game and maybe the Pac-12 after dark. Like you don't get to watch a zillion games every day. So Washington's one of those teams. I guess I've seen them play Oregon. They do have, they got Michael Penix, which is, got the high flying attack and all that, which that I think Alabama matches up with pretty well. They were able to stop that Heupel offense pretty well cold in the Tennessee game. I know they're not the same thing, but a lot of high flying plays there. They go fast, had a quarterback with an arm, the whole deal. So I think on that note, they match up pretty well with Washington. But in the Texas game, I'd be interested to see again at this point. I don't necessarily think Quinn Ewers, to me, he sort of built the reputation of his season on that Alabama game and hasn't played as well since then. So interesting to see. I'm not going to pick Alabama outright in that game because I watched them play at Bryant-Denny Stadium and Texas beat the brakes off of them. It wasn't as close as the score was that game, but that to me, that's the more intriguing matchup, I think.
Absolutely. Since you brought it up, you started at Horse Racing Nation. Is Nick Saban easier or harder to interview than a horse?
They say about the same things. The things people always hit me on at the beginning of this it's like, are you nervous to talk to Nick Saban? He's mean to reporters sometimes. Dude, I had a horse trainer threaten to fight me one time, and he meant it. And he could have. You walk back there. I knew hardly anything about horse racing. I graduated in May of 2020, and I knew somebody working at Horse Racing Nation. He's like, "Hey, we need a live body now. Do you know anything about horse racing?" And I lied a little bit. I was like, "Oh yeah, for sure. Watch the Kentucky Derby nearly every year," and I ended up really liking the sport, but it was so different from everything I'd done before because they just hand you a Churchill Downs barn pass. Just show up at 4 or 5 in the morning and just talk to people while they're training horses or whatever. But there's some characters back there. And
but once you get back into the paddock, all bets are off, huh?
Yeah, it was trainers who that guy could have absolutely fought me.
Oh my goodness!
And won. That wasn't ending well for me. Also, like people with money.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
you saw some of that out there. I'm like, some of these people I think could make me disappear pretty quick.
Yeah, the
So,
horse
like,
you said ain't no joke.
I feel like horse racing in the South is like if college football is too straight laced for you. If there's too much accountability, then you go. If you want too much accountability, you go to college football where there's basically no rules. So instead, you go to horse racing where there's literally no rules.
yeah, no,
And
it's great.
F1 money.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I got on the Mizzou beat in the first place was because I was like really on top of the Bob Baffert like Kentucky Derby cheating scandal. Like, I just broke all sorts of news on that one because, like, for a while I was the youngest national horse racing rider by 30 something years, like some ridiculous amount of time. But I was also the one who had like most recently covered like cops and courts at, internships when I was in college or when I was like reporting on news in college. So like I knew when to show up at the courthouse and I knew how to like search through like, federal lawsuits and such. So like I was just breaking news just by virtue of being the only person to know anything. So it's it is really the Wild West. I keep saying I'm going to wait 15 years and then I'm going to write the Baffert like Derby cheating scandal book.
So, okay, last question really. Do you regret getting out of horse racing before you could have become best friends with Nikola Jokic?
Yes. Yeah, that was you ran into some characters that like you just see people at the horse track from time to time, like Bill Murray occasionally, like he'll just show up in the winning circle at Churchill Downs. I've run around like seen Dale Earnhardt Jr. I went to dinner with Mattress Mac one time when I was there, but yeah, no Jokic. That was I'll have to go back one of these days and see if I can run into him.
Oh, this is a delight. See, I was just imagining, with what you were describing that, both Coach Saban and the horses just say nay to everything, but you went far beyond where I was going with it. That was brilliant.
Your listeners are going to be like, what is happening? Who is this guest?
Oh my goodness. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. For those who want to follow Matt Stahl, just go to AL.com. He's one of their Alabama writers there. You can find him on X at Matt Stahl 97. It's been a pleasure, Matt. We looking forward to talking to you sometime in the future, but good luck prepping for the Rose Bowl. It's going to be an exciting game. It's going to be a fabulous venue. I'm glad you get to go check that out.
Yeah, it's going to be a great time. But yeah, thank you all for having me. It has been a blast.
Thanks. So we'll be right back, and Shehan and I are going to talk a little bit about what we've learned.
The College Football Survivor Show, where playoff survival is always on the line.
Well, that was a good conversation. I think I learned a lot from Matt and his perspectives on Alabama as they head into the Rose Bowl. Sean, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, well, it was a good conversation, and I feel like it got to one of my biggest questions, which was, I don't know exactly how good this Alabama team is. And I think that even Matt admitted, right? Like, we don't necessarily know on a 1 to 10 scale, like, is this Alabama team a 9, a 7? Like it's hard to kind of tell with it. They've had so many performances that are 10 level. They've had a couple of performances that are 4 level across the season. But, one thing that I was a little encouraged to hear about is, for Jalen Milroe to have kind of taken that turnover component out of his game, I think is a really big deal. And he makes a good point kind of thinking back to some of what we've seen the past couple of weeks from Jalen Milroe. It has been a lot of balls going too long or going too wide and not necessarily being delivered into coverage. I think that Tommy Rees deserves a lot of credit for that with the way that he's calling games. But I mean, the thing is, if Alabama doesn't turn over the ball more than once, probably, I really like them in this game.
Yeah, I have similar views on that, especially the growth of the entire offense. It's kind of learned throughout the season, both individual performances as with the offensive line, developing, perhaps as he pointed out, conditioning improving so that they're lasting longer as a line to protect Milroe in the back there, but also allowing Jalen Milroe to develop into a quarterback and giving him more options to run around, but also Tommy Rees changing, kind of simplifying the offense. This was pointed out by Matt. I mean, the opportunity for him to choose passes that lend more towards his ability. So if he is missing a pass, it's a deep ball. It's not something that's going to potentially turn the ball over really close to wherever they were. I mean, I think all of that coming together is why I can see the favor, how a lot of people are favoring Alabama heading into this Rose Bowl, because Michigan is interesting. I mean, the one thing that, this is something where I think I'll say for talking to when we develop with the Michigan analyst, that when we get to talking to him, but this Jalen Milroe, I don't think he's so different than anything that they've seen. I mean, the types of quarterbacks. I mean, I was kind of writing them up. It's like Jalen Milroe is like if Caleb Williams had a competent defense. I mean, more than a competent defense, and strong talent all around him playing at the level that they should. I mean, he's closer to that, and I don't think Michigan has faced an offense like this, especially with a quarterback like Milroe. So that part, I'm absolutely extremely interested to see how they're going to prepare for that and whether or not that's going to be the deciding factor in it. But I mean, it's a fascinating situation, both sides of the ball. I love this matchup. I love both these matchups, but this one in particular is just a mystery to me in how they're actually going to shape up.
No, I mean, and you mention it. Obviously, you look at Michigan right now. I mean, who's the best quarterback they played this year? Like probably Taulia Tagovailoa, probably, who they only beat by 7 points. And after that, it is kind of a wasteland, right? Like it's Kyle McCord, who kind of got run off at Ohio State. I was even looking, they played UNLV earlier in the year, but that was before they put Jordan Mailata in at quarterback. So like that was when they were playing with their worst quarterback. They didn't even play the good quarterback at that time. So it's going to be a different kind of challenge for Michigan having to go up against this Alabama team. But I think that Alabama also has a different kind of rushing challenge, like what Matt mentioned, having to cover this Michigan team. They're going to try to go up the middle against a banged up, like Matt was mentioning, Alabama defensive line in a different kind of way. So I think to me, though, it's just that dynamic component that I can't get past. And that's why I just can't favor Michigan in this game, because I don't know. If Michigan gets off schedule, how does this work? And I think that Alabama has the ability to get them there. So a lot left to happen. And the other thing, too, is you got 15 practices to kind of work some of this stuff out. I would not be surprised to see Michigan sort of work up a deep pass early for this matchup to try to get things on the board. But it's going to be an interesting game for sure. I was interested also to say that, with Alabama looking forward to those other two opponents, that Matt feels like they match up better against Washington than they do against Texas. I think that's probably correct just because of the power that Alabama has in their secondary. But, obviously Washington has the best quarterback on the board in my estimation, of Michael Penix Jr. They've got talent at receiver that nobody else, even Texas, can really match. And so it would be an interesting battle, kind of the chess match to see those Washington receivers versus Alabama secondary. So I do think that Texas is probably the tougher matchup for Alabama, but I think both would be really good games if we get them.
Yeah, and I think going back to the whole Texas thing, yes, they beat Alabama, but I'd be very, Nick Saban would love nothing more than another crack at them. That would be, he's done it before. We've seen this, as the saying goes, it's hard to do what Washington just did and beat the same team twice in one season, let alone as well as they did both times, and the second time, compared to the first. So, the whole thing with Washington and Alabama in particular, it's fun to see these teams, and Michigan, actually, I should be honest here, is to see these teams once they leave conference play, the depths of conference play, how they do when they're facing completely new programs, at least ones that have been in their own zone. Is the SEC really as strong as they typically are? We thought they weren't before the season, but have they strengthened, or before the regular season kind of got really underway? Is the Pac-12 as strong as we thought they were towards the end? We're going to see that. It's going to be fun to see how they match up. And again, as we were just saying, to see Michigan take on an offense like what they're going to be seeing at Alabama is going to be utterly fascinating. They've seen good defenses before, but I don't think they're going to have seen an offense quite like they're about to see. This really, it's whetting my appetite. I cannot wait for January 1st. It cannot get here soon enough.
Well, let's close it with this. What is one thing after our talk with Matt that you are most concerned about when it comes to Alabama, not just for this one game, but for the next two games potentially?
Honestly, I think my biggest concern is whether or not they can protect Milroe enough to allow him to continue what he was doing before. Because we've seen, this is going to be a caliber of opponent that is not only going to be as talented as anyone they've faced before, but is going to be throwing things probably a little different than what they've seen all season. And he is still in his first season as a true starter of the program. And again, we've talked about how much upside we see. We've talked about how going into next season, he's probably going to be, a preseason Heisman candidate, if not the leading candidate, and he's going to be battling for it that year. But this is still his first season, and there's a lot to be said for the experience in the pocket, and I'd love to see how he develops. And he's probably going to be the make or break for my view on how they do going into this game.
Yeah, I think for me, it is just the down-to-down consistency, right? Obviously, with Michigan, they are the most efficient team in the entire country on offense. Every single play, essentially, they create a positive play for themselves. Will they be able to do that the same way? Will Alabama be able to do that same thing against Michigan? That's kind of a big question for me. We haven't necessarily seen them do it consistently over the course of multiple games. The closest that we got from it was their game against LSU, which really is one of the worst defenses that they played all season long. And their defense has done enough to allow them to be in these games regardless. But I think we need a good Alabama offense game, not a high scoring output. They don't need to score 35 points to win this game, but they do need to hang on to the ball, because I think one of the most dangerous things that could happen in this game is Michigan holding the ball for more than 40 minutes of possession and Alabama's defense just getting worn out while Alabama's offense can't get anything consistent going offensively. They need to be able to hang on to the ball at least long enough to wear down that Michigan defense and then hit on some of these explosive plays on top of it. But I think they're going to be able to do it, but I'm going to be really curious whenever we get to talk to our Michigan expert later this week to see what his thoughts are on it as well.
So that'll be it for this particular episode. I wanted to thank all of you who listen to us. I wanted to thank our producer, Joey Aliberti. Be sure, if you get a chance, to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. You can find us on X or TikTok at CFB Survivor Show, where you can vote, message us, and see how we look in visual versions of our particular podcast. I'm Bobak Hayeri. He's Shehan Jayaraja. You can find his work at cbssports.com. Thanks for listening.
The College Football Survivor Show, where playoff survival is always on the line.